Hi, friends. Welcome to the Legend Fiction Show. I'm really pleased to be joined today by Trae McMaken. He is an author I discovered, gosh, 3 years ago now, perhaps. He wrote a book. It was called The Crippled King, and it's about dwarves. And I was absolutely hooked by the Kindle preview, and then I couldn't help myself. I had to buy the book, and this is one of those few books that I have bad ADD, okay? This is one of the few books where I could not put it down, and I burned through the whole thing probably in a weekend, and I could not believe that I couldn't get enough of it. So, Trey, I'm going to keep glazing you for a minute here, but welcome to the show. It's good to have you with us, and I've wanted to talk to you for at least 3 to 4 years. Now I finally got you on the show, and I'm stoked to be able to introduce you to my community.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to chat.
No, my pleasure. So, yeah, give me a minute to keep singing your praises here. So, here's what I loved about this book. You kind of said it as you're crafting the books you'd always dreamed about, what you'd wished, the stories you'd wished the dwarves in Middle Earth, what their adventures had been like. And then you went on to just go and create your own. And I remember, so not only is it written brilliantly, I thought it was awesome. I loved it. The depth of the world building was so much more than I expected from a fantasy novel. And I guess that says something about the quality of fantasy novels I'm reading. But you told me just off air that you didn't actually put that much in it. You kind of held back. And I just remember being kind of like swept into just the depth of stuff I had never heard of when it came to how dwarves would think and build and delve and go into their world. So that was all so cool. But most importantly, what what moved me most, and I want to learn your story, and I want to learn your writing habits and what you're doing now, and the fact you've written 4 books, I think, in this series now, and I'm still reading your latest, Mind Lord. But
6 in the series, and then I
oh
just
wow,
released a new trilogy. So, yeah.
oh okay, we're going to talk all about that. Here's what I loved most about your books: the characters. It's just the characters. They're phenomenal characters. You can root for them. They're real. They don't. There's so many books I've read where just characters are flat. They're just doing stuff. You don't know what it really means to them, and you put in just a riveting sense of depth. Like these things could be movies and they would work and I would watch them. So, Trey, before we get into the stories, what's your origin story? What got you to a point where you're writing now multiple novels in this epic fantasy world that you're building?
Well, my love of fantasy goes back to my early childhood. I don't remember a time in my life where I didn't love the fantasy genre. Um, all the way back to when I was a little kid playing with toy swords in the woods with my brothers and friends, pretending to be Reepicheep from Narnia. So my background is back. I started writing my first books. I still have copies of them when I was 11 or ish, drawing maps, writing stories in fantasy world. I wrote a novella in my teen years, and then I finished my first 2 novels in my teen years. So my writing goes back very far.
Amazing. Wow. Yeah.
I went to my undergrad. I'm have probably 2 more degrees than I should admit, but my first one was in creative writing,
Okay.
my first bachelor's. And I then went and studied, I got 2 master's degrees related to folklore and studied storytelling, performance storytelling, historical, like narrative, the construction of narrative. I worked with also folk music was a big thing. So I had the 2-part thing where I
And
was,
it's all the super cool instruments behind you.
yeah, so I was working in a lot in folk music and tying folk music into historical narrative and working in the historical narrative vein for performance. I worked with the National Park Service and a para-associated organization doing that kind of thing when I was in grad school, and did a little bit of field work as a folklorist. So I got a master's degree in storytelling and did a lot of performance storytelling and a lot of work in the traditional tales, the German Märchen, the traditional stories that would have been orally told and orally transmitted. All this time, I was always tinkering to some degree with writing. Then, in order to support my family better, when I got married and started having kids, I became a nurse. I'm a registered nurse, and I moved back home after going to school in various places. I moved back home to rural Michigan, and I was working as a nurse, supporting my family. I decided that I was going to revise some of my previous works because
Mhm.
over the years, since about 2012, I've released about 15 titles. Um,
Amazing.
And I decided I was going to do some revision and release some of my earlier work, which was more geared towards kids and young adults, my earlier stuff. And then it was while I was working the pandemic as a emergency hospice end of life nurse.
Gosh.
Um,
Wow. Okay.
I was in my attic where I had an office, and
Mhm.
I had an idea, a dwarven prospector, and what if a dwarf had to build an entire dwarven colony? What was the start of a dwarven colony look like?
Mhm.
And I started writing, and I didn't anticipate there'd be a second book, let alone 6 in that particular series. Probably going to be more. I've already been tinkering with further on a 7th book, and now I just released the Findle's Embrace trilogy, which is set in the same world, although it doesn't follow the dwarves. It follows the elves in that world, or an elf equivalent, sort of elf-like. The humans call them elves. But I just released that this past weekend, so that whole
Oh
trilogy
wow.
just dropped, and you can see my proof copies behind me right here. So I don't feel comfortable if I'm not writing. I something feels off if I'm not writing, it's not a regular part of my daily life. The amount that I'm writing tends to change depending on life circumstances. So right now I just finished, I do most everything. Like I revise myself, I edit myself. My wife copy edits
Mhm.
for me.
Copy edits.
Just proof reads, my final
Sure.
drafts. But so it takes me a long, long, long time. So this
Mhm.
trilogy that I just released, I started in July of 2024, and I just released it, writing all 3 books, revising all 3 books, and doing all that. So,
Incredible.
um, but it's an everyday, pretty much weekends
Mhm.
included, and typically process when I'm working actively on a project like that. When I'm writing uh, the initial drafts, I want to be at least 1,000 words a day. Um,
Mhm.
tend to do more than that when I'm in the heat of a first draft. The painstaking work that often happens in revision of making sure everything is working right. But my favorite part is those first drafts, that exploration. I'm not a person who overly outlines.
Was gonna
I have
say
general
like,
ideas, but
okay,
for me
you
there's
know.
a lot of exploration and adventure.
Mhm.
So I'm exploring the characters and exploring the world. I put a character in a place,
Mhm.
apply pressure, and see what happens.
I'm trying to remember which book it was. Is it the second or the third one where they end up um just deep under a volcano? And it was one of the most incredible climactic scenes, and just I don't want to give stuff away because it's so awesome. Great set piece. I'm just gonna yeah, I don't want to give stuff away. Second or third book. I don't remember anymore
There's
because it's
the
been 2 years
second,
now.
the Mouth of Fire. Yeah.
There you go. That's right. That's right. Mouth Fire. And it just I remember being so okay, maybe here's my next question. How is it that you craft something that doesn't feel I don't know, it's not fluffy fantasy and it's not just like throwing elements in. There's a real awesome grounded sense to this world. I don't just stuff feels real. And maybe you're like, yeah, it's because I'm awesome. It's like, well, okay, that's probably true. But I remember going through this and just that first book just blew me away. The second book, I was so mad because it wasn't as long as the first book, and I wanted a lot more. And then it's the next book. I can't remember anymore which one it was. They all run together now. But being able to go back and keep investigating and exploring these worlds, you keep deepening. It feels real in a sort of mythic sense. Maybe it goes right back to what you're talking about, your studies in folklore and the live storytelling. I think you said so what are some of the disciplines or thoughts or research or inspirations or whatever did you draw on to build out and flesh out this world? And I need to come back and ask about the whole plotting versus pantsing thing and just exploration writing. And it's like, man, how do you hold this thing together the way you did? But we'll get to that. First, what's the inspiration to how you went about building this world beyond Tolkien should have done it?
Before you build the world, to some degree, you have to write what you know. If you don't know what you're talking about, pretty quickly it becomes apparent, I think, as a reader. I collect information and experiences I have throughout my life, to the point where I get really, really interested in real life prospecting, really, really interested in real life geology. Really, really, I mean, I raise sheep. So when sheep show up in my books, I I have experience with those tasks with that farming and everything. When I'm, I have rocks all around me, this is a tiger eye, I I like to look at things and think about what that's like. I research historical mining. It's just a lot of hours of learning about the things that I'm going to include, and not because I decide I'm going to write a book there about this, therefore I'm going to research it. It's that I'm really really interested in this stuff. Let's write a story.
Mhm.
So when I'm writing about wilderness survival, it's because I've had a lifelong interest in the outdoors. If I'm writing about horses, I was a trail guide on horseback trail guide. You know what I mean? So like,
Um,
it's important. You can't just cloister yourself in an office and have no experience and no interests and then write a great fantasy book. You're going to write a fantasy book with medieval combat and you've never held a sword or ridden a horse you know, there's a lot of reasons to go out and like figure out what does it feel like to use a thumb draw on a recurve bow, or something. When you are then go and enter into an experience where you're writing about a character who's in those situations and doing those things, you have something to draw. I'm not
I got to
saying
ask
that
about
I've
some.
done everything. You still make it up. I tell people I'm not a geologist. I'm not an expert. What I want to be able to make you think I am.
Well, you made it seem completely effortless in it. So mega kudos, especially since you've never dug a mine. I'm assuming. Have you? You probably
No,
have.
I have not
No.
dug a
Okay.
mine. No, unfortunately, if I had any kind of rock layer under my house, we'd be in trouble. But unfortunately, I'm on a lot of clay.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go back and ask. You said something interesting a minute ago. You said about folklorist field work. Can you
Yeah.
explain what that means? That sounds intriguing.
Also, for example, I did work with Michigan State University, a museum, wherein I organized a fieldwork trip to go interview old fiddlers, fiddle musicians around, mostly in Michigan. Did one stop in Ontario, but interviewing fiddlers about the folk practices of being a fiddle player, traditional fiddle player within a particular music tradition. Um, so that would be field work, where you're going out, you're getting interviews, you're researching the way that these traditions manifest themselves. You're asking questions about the community, the history, the nature of the music, that kind of thing.
Fascinating. What was the weirdest thing you ever learned out on one of these field trips? Hot seat,
The
or maybe just most interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it was always for me the interplay of a creolization within a tradition. So the way that different traditions, people groups interact and create something that is not separately identifiable, creolized folk tradition. And there's really, if you go far enough back, I don't think that there's any tradition that isn't in that kind of tradition. But oftentimes, in the past, people have had it in their mind that folklore was about just having a story from or a practice from one particular community or one particular ethnic uh, background or something of that nature. And really, when you really get into it, a lot of times you find out that it's really, really complex and that human beings don't live their lives without influence. They're constantly being influenced. So you find these myths of the isolated folk community that have somehow preserved traditions. It's almost, in my experience, it's almost never the case.
How did some of that influence the novels that you have gone on to write?
Well, for me, the character isn't limited to the individual, and the story isn't limited to the individual. I love history, historiography, folklore. So for me, a big part of my interest is the shape of a culture over time, the narrative arc of an entire people group over time. And that's something that I focus on a lot in the Dwarves of Ice book. As anyone who's picked any of them up probably be able to say, people sometimes get upset, like, wait, how are we in a different, how have we gone into the future? How have we gone to the past? Like, why aren't we sticking with just the same people? Well, I'm interested in the greater arc that's going on. It's what I'm interested in. And I firmly believe in writing what I'm interested in. And if I'm not doing it for myself, I'm not probably going to spend my time on it.
So let's talk about the writing process. I want to understand, how do you identify enough of your story? It sounds like you're an exploratory type of writer. So
Mm-hmm.
how much of the story do you think through or set up before you go and you start writing? If you're not a complete plotter with like scene beats and spreadsheets, which is, I'm not either, but there are some geniuses out there who know down to the hairline fracture where things are going to be. Sounds like you're
Yeah.
more of an exploratory writer. Um,
Yeah.
what's that look like for you?
Cripple King, I didn't know the end when I started, for sure. The Mine Lord, I didn't know the end. It really varies. A lot of times I just have a feeling. I'm not talking about like an intuition. I'm talking
Right.
about some kind of emotional sense
Payoff or achievement.
that I'm looking for out of a story.
Okay.
Or I have a character and I'm thinking about, what is this character's inner life and experience, and how is that going to resolve? What inner change is this character going to experience? A lot of things flow just from that. When I introduced Nain, who is the MC of the Cripple King, literally just started with, I'm going to throw this dwarf into the wilderness and see what's going to happen to him.
Yeah.
And as I develop, as I get to know a character, then I start having ideas. Then I start to go, oh, I think this kind of thing might happen to him, but it's more like, who is he and what's going on with him that I get to that point. And it's unique in each individual instance. Every time I start a book, it's a very unique experience. Like, I'm working on one right now that I do have an arc. I think part of why I have such an arc right now is I've been working on this last series for the past 13 months without being able to keep from thinking ahead to the next
Okay.
projects. So I actually, like, I've been revising for months,
Hmm.
and I have to keep myself under control. I have to finish. I finished what I started, but I'm still
Okay.
thinking this next story that's taking shape in my head. Like, thinking about it. I'm
Yeah.
jotting down notes when I'm trying to fall asleep. So I kind of have a scope, but I don't know how I'm going to get there. And it very well could change.
Yeah.
Things
Yeah.
change. I'll
Nice.
get to a point in the story where I'm like, well, that happened in this last series. I was like, I had planned this whole sequence. I had planned this whole thing, and it's not going to happen. The characters aren't going to do that. The world isn't going to do that. That's not right for who these people have become in the meantime.
Yeah. So what do you do in that kind of situation? How have you handled it?
There have been times when I've just had to delete stuff and go, I liked it, but it's not right. And stick it in a file of slops,
Yeah, exactly.
and you mourn it, and you move on because
Sure.
the characters are doing something else, or the story just, you write a whole scene and a whole thing, and you realize, you know what, it was important for me to know that,
Hmm.
but it's not important for it to be in the book for the reader. It doesn't make it as good as it could be if I started here instead of here.
Hmm.
So you take all of
Yeah.
that and you go, I'm glad I wrote it because I know the character that much better, but it's gone. It's out. And that's hard to do sometimes, but sometimes you're just faced with
Yeah.
that decision and well, it's got to go.
So for 13 months, you've been writing a trilogy, and then you dropped all three books this past weekend.
Yes,
Okay, so
all
now I
three at
don't
once.
feel bad for
Now,
not seeing that headline.
there has been a Royal Road and a Patreon release going on.
Gotcha. Okay.
The Royal Road, the Patreon release, I finished because I wanted to give my supporters, as soon as the ebooks, paperbacks, hardbacks go live, I wanted to give my
Hmm.
supporters who have been supporting the release access to the full story. So they got full access on Patreon this week too. But
Okay.
the Royal Road continues, and it'll probably be up on Royal Road for a
So I've
couple
not heard
months.
of Royal Road. What is that? Is that like a Kickstarter?
No, Royal Road is a web serial platform. I only got
Oh,
into it
gotcha.
a couple years ago with the Mine Lord. The Mine Lord was the first thing I ever put up on Royal Road.
Hmm.
So Royal Road is kind of the home of, it's most known for being a progression fantasy web serial site, but it also has readers for other subgenres of fantasy. And it's a really solid platform for releasing stories as installments and can drive Patreon readership. It has just a good way of connecting with a different base of readers. And in fact, the Mind Lord might have more readers than the Cripple King. It's hard to know just because
Hmm.
of, well, maybe not that extreme, but just because of the Royal Road readers finding it on that website and liking it. I wasn't sure whether I was going to publish the Mind Lord because I went about writing the Mind Lord by going, I really am not done geeking out about this. And
Okay.
I haven't got it out of my system. The Dwarves of Icecloak was first a standalone, and then it was 2 books, and then it was a trilogy, and then it was 4 books. I
Hmm.
didn't, and then I was, after a little while, I had released Bones of Stone, and I was like, you know what? I still want to write about a dwarf starting a mine. And I haven't been as geeky about it as I want to be. And I don't know if it'll land with readers, but I personally want to go that far into it. And so I wrote it and just let myself do what I wanted to do and without being so concerned about how it would land. And I was aware of Royal Road, and I thought, let's test it. Let's throw it in front of some readers here and see what happens. And well, what happened was it went crazy.
Amazing.
So I'd end up releasing it and releasing a companion book, The Jackal of the Waste, for it, and it was an insane thing because Royal Road puts you at very close proximity to your readers because they're
Hmm.
commenting on your chapters. And I hadn't experienced anything quite like that previously. Releasing more as a traditional indie, you're just releasing like a book and you release it into the
Right.
world
Right.
and you might get some reviews and you like, apart from Goodreads and Amazon reviews, you're kind of like, it's silence, right? Radio silence for the most part, a lot of the time. But with Royal Road, I mean, they're talking about it. They're yelling at you. They're doing everything as you're releasing chapters.
So
And
it's a
it's,
lot more of a collaborative experience.
well, I don't, some people do it collaboratively where they'll write it as they're releasing it. I wrote
Oh,
and then
okay.
released because I don't
Gotcha.
want the influence of readers in my head very much
Sure.
while I'm writing. I,
Right.
I don't want that kind of pressure. And in fact, I feel like that pressure gets worse the more readers you have. It's hard not to be aware of the fact that you don't have anonymity anymore in what you're doing.
Right. Right.
But I don't release as I'm writing because I do not want that kind of influence. But I will write
Hmm.
something and then release it. And I typically write revise and then I'll release it as a serial. The Findle's Embrace trilogy is a little off brand. I got away with calling the mind for Royal Road. I got away with calling the Mind Lord a progression fantasy, which attracts people on Royal Road because it's their bread and butter there, the readers. But
Okay.
the Findle's Embrace is not progression fantasy at all. So
Okay.
um, it's still been
Could,
fun.
could you define progression fantasy? What does that mean?
Yeah, progression fantasy is a subgenre of fantasy where a person starts essentially as it's normally. Are you familiar with lit RPG?
Yes, just enough to have read 3 chapters of one of them and realize it's not for me, but I
Right.
understand the genre.
So lit RPG is progression fantasy, but progression fantasy is not all lit RPG. So the
Okay.
idea is progression fantasy might be something where a person starts weak, like maybe you have a story about a wizard and they start
I
out
see.
as an apprentice, but they end up as a master.
I
There's a
see. So character
progression.
progresses through a
Normally
story
it's,
arc. They're not a flat character
yeah,
all the way
there's
through.
normally
Okay.
a sense of increase in power or increase in influence or increase in something. The
Okay.
Mind Lord is often categorized as a progression fantasy because the colony grows.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's the progression from nothing to something. So that's the gist of progression fantasy. It's this sense of, and lit RPG typically is a subcategory of progression fantasy.
Gotcha. And that
It's
focuses on a
definitely
lot
not for
more of just
everyone.
narrative plus game mechanics. So it's a different read.
Yeah. The lit RPG puts the game mechanics to the progression,
Right, right, right. So let's talk
which
about your
I don't
latest.
write.
No, yeah, yeah. Let's talk about your latest trilogy then.
Yeah,
And then I want to ask about like what's next for you. But with this current
sure.
trilogy that you just launched about elves, I think you said in the world of Ice Cloak.
Yes.
How long is each book?
Oh, the first one is the shortest. It's a little bit under 100K words.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
I think it's something like 95, 97,000 or something about the
Okay.
length of the Crippled King, I think.
Okay.
The other two are both longer at like 115-ish um, uh, thousand words. So
Amazing.
that's sort of where I don't set out to write at that word count. And really, this series, the Findle's Embrace series, while the Cripple King is like a standalone book, you could read it. The Mouth of Fire or the Mine, you could read those books just by themselves. Findle's Embrace, the arc is one continuous arc with, certain characters. So they're really meant to be read together, which is part of why I like to release them all at once. I don't know why I like to sit around the 100,000 mark most of the time, with a few exceptions on either end.
Well, darn it, you keep landing in a great length, it seems like. So talk about the series. What's the vibe and the direction of the series and the blurb for the first book?
Yeah, so in this series, it takes place in the Wellspring world, which is the world in which the Dwarves of Icecloak takes place. And you may recall that in the Dwarves of Icecloak, elves are mentioned in passing, but you never see
I was
them.
going to say, 'cause I didn't remember there being much about that. Okay.
Yeah, and you hear them mentioned in the second gate, and maybe a couple other passing mentions, but you never see them actively in the books. But this is my exploration of something akin to elves that exist in the world. And there is the Dwarves of Ice focuses a lot on the physical realities of the world, but the Bindle's Embrace also focuses heavily on the physical reality of the world, but it also dives a little bit more into the mystical elements that you just get glimpses of in the Dwarves of Ice Cloak. And it follows a few different characters. There's a few different point of views in the series. One of the main ones is a Vian or Elven female named Jareen, who has been serving as the equivalent of a nurse in a human city.
Oh, interesting.
How she ends up getting drawn back into her homeland under distressing circumstances. So that's sort of the tagline of the series is will mortality return to the elves? There are certainly some horror elements within the series, some darker themes with mortality and free will and power and things of that nature that take place in the series. But it's been a very fun write for me,
Yep.
and it incorporates elements and stories that I started as a teenager working on.
Okay.
So it was kind of like a long time coming for some of this.
Yeah. Personal throwbacks. What's your take on, as you're crafting these elves, Tolkien's elves or D&D elves, I think are frequently the benchmarks. Did you do anything different with your treatment of them that captured your
Yeah,
imagination? What did you do?
yeah. I don't want to do spoilers. Some of
Okay.
the biggest departures would be spoilers. They're
Okay.
definitely there are things about them that are recognizable as
Hmm.
related to the traditional fantasy elf.
Okay.
However, I would think that they're significantly distinct, and that becomes more
Nice.
and more apparent throughout this as the series or the trilogy
Okay.
progresses. They are not the idyllic Tolkien race.
Okay. All right. Cool. What was it about this trilogy that just made you want to write it? Was it the not just the story you wanted to tell, but was it the vibe, the feeling, the mythos that you're crafting? Like, what was it that pulled you into needing to write this trilogy?
I mean, that's a deep question. I think there's a lot of things. I had some unfinished business with stories that I'd been working on for many, many years, but I've never committed to writing stories that wouldn't let go of me. I
Hmm.
couldn't leave them alone forever, and it was time to
Hmm.
finally address them. There was things that I wanted to do that were intimidating maybe to me
Wow.
when I was younger. Some ideas maybe you know you're not ready for them to tackle them. So there's that. But a lot of things changed for me. This is one of those situations where I had ideas about, oh, this plot point's going to happen and this is going to happen, and then I got the characters involved and they did other things than I anticipated. But a lot of it has to do with me. I process things while I write, things that I'm dealing with, things that I'm struggling. I don't really self-insert to in that sense that I don't think anyone would look at a character and go, "Oh, that's supposed to be Trey," in
Hmm.
any way. Um,
Sure.
I don't like set out trying to like write someone like me, but the experiences I had during the pandemic heavily informed this series, for example.
Wow.
And so that I don't want to get too into off the rails there. That's
I mean, that right there just sounds absolutely. I can't wait to figure out where that goes. What are some things that early fans have told you they absolutely loved about this new trilogy?
well, it's gotten some really positive reviews on Royal Road so far, where
Hmm.
the first readers are reading it. Similar things to the rest of the Wellspring World books, which are about the cultures, the history, the depth of the world building seems to be what fans really connect with for both
Hmm.
series set in this world.
Hmm.
I've heard a lot about the realities of a real functional working world and the way that
Hmm.
it feels like that. So that is something that is really gratifying to me because I think about that. I think about what are their trade goods and how are they trading those goods between civilizations, and how would that structure a culture and how would that influence politics and war, and how are the ocean currents factoring into those trade routes. Those are things that I think
Awesome.
about. So I've heard positive feedback about that type of depth of world
Yeah,
building.
man. I know that we could keep chatting, and I have a lot more questions, but we got to start wrapping. So, last question for you would be two last questions, but last one: what's next for you? Are you starting anything new? You taking some time off? What do you
I
see as the future
I'm
for
not good
you?
at taking time off with writing. I tried last summer after I
Yeah.
dropped the Mind Lord and Jackal of the Waste. I was like, I'm just gonna chill for a little while. After a month or two, I start to feel
Antsy.
not okay. Um, and and then I start writing again. I'm bothered trying to stop this time. I have already been sorry. You probably hear my cows mooing and my dog barking, and it's
No, you're good.
crazy
Like
over
you
here.
said, you have your own farm.
It's getting to be cow feeding time for my calves. I have a couple calves out here. So I'm writing the project I'm working on right now is I haven't announced exactly what it is yet. I think only like two people know my two beta readers, my wife and one of my best friends who read stuff for me ahead of time, just so I can gauge their reactions. But I haven't even given any to them to read yet. They're longish projects. They're not set in the Wellspring world. I did, however, sit down and write an entire scene on a new book in the Wellspring world the other day. So it looks like I've already started working in that again. And I have multiple projects planned for that world, for the Wellspring world. Um, I have such a backlog of projects, and some of them are already partially started, and there's stuff written on them, and I gotta go where I feel inclined and passionate.
Yeah.
If I am not interested in a story, I'll literally just stop it and I'll find something I'm
Mhm.
interested in, and maybe I'll come back to it.
Okay. My last question in a minute is going to be advice that you'd have for other people who are writing and who want to write. Before that, you mentioned you've got a website, you've got a Royal Road, you have a Patreon. Where do you want to send people? Where can they find you online so that they can buy your books, support you, keep growing your adventure?
Discord. I want to see everyone on Discord. I have a Discord channel. It's for my very active readers. It's a great time. Uh, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Patreon. Of course, I'm always happy for people to join the Patreon. But I'm on Royal Road. Uh, Yeah. But the place where I spend the most time and interact most with my readers is Discord. Become a really fun community, and I can provide a link invite to the Discord server uh, that you can post if you want with this.
Okay. Well, that's kind. What I'll do is in the description of this video, I'll put a link to your website. People can go and explore there. They can reach out to you, and you can invite them however you will.
Yeah.
So, one of the reasons why you and I are having this conversation is because, like I said, I finally reached out to you, and I've wanted to chat with you for years, and so we finally did it, and this has been awesome.
Yeah, it's been
Um,
great.
and we have,
I want to chat with you again so I can ask you more about yourself instead of just
hey,
answering about me.
I'll take it. I'll take it. But in a couple of months, as of this recording, October, we have an online convention. I've been hosting it every year. We're now doing our fourth year together, and Trey's agreed to come and join us and be one of the authors in the sort of the Storytellers Expo area. So maybe announcements on your website, your social, or
Yes.
something sometime
I'll
soon, so people can go follow you there.
Yeah, I'll drop some announcements on my socials about it. Planning to do just an AMA and or meet and greet there. Just anyone. Just a time to chat storytelling anyway. Should be fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, get to meet you and bring their questions about at the Dwarves of Ice Cloak. So the again, link for that con, you'll see two links in the description. One is for Trey's website, one is for our con, which is called Legend Haven. It is the friendliest fiction con in the galaxy, and we can say so because Legend Fiction is the coolest group of storytellers in the world. Altogether, we're looking for the best stories in the world. And you might not, but I will. I'm throwing in Dwarves of Ice Cloak as one of the ones that I wish everybody knew about, and they're amazing. So, last question for you for this
Sure.
conversation anyway. What advice would you like to leave with or share with other writers, or perhaps even yourself, looking back at yourself as that teen? What's something you wish you knew then that now you know that might have changed your life back then?
Well, I'd say a lot of things to myself as a teenager. You just set my mind reeling on that one.
Well, specifically around
Yeah.
writing and
You know, when I
storytelling.
was when I was a teenager, even when I was in college, indie indie publishing wasn't what it is now. I mean, it
Right.
wasn't like you could just go out and publish on KDP or Ingram Spark or wherever. I don't know how
Mhm.
old Ingram Spark is, but like that wasn't a thing. Like when you were looking to become a writer, it was like the traditional option was really, I mean, there were people outliers maybe, but yeah, I didn't even hear about it.
Yeah.
It was traditional publishing. And I got really disillusioned at one point because it's like, I don't necessarily want to write. And it's why I'm indie published today, because I want to write what I want to write. And I don't really want to
Mhm.
argue about that. If I like the story, that's what I want to release. And indie publishing makes it possible. So my advice is just, I do not write to market as a rule. I write what I like, what stories I want to write. First novel I ever wrote when I was like 18 or so, 18 or 19. I wrote because I was looking for something to read, and I thought it was the first full length novel I ever wrote. It was because I was like, can't quite find the vibe that I'm looking for. What? Let me try to write this book, and that's still kind of how I feel about writing. Is I'm gonna
Yeah.
enjoy this. I'm going to create something that I enjoy. Man, can you imagine how awful writing books would be if you're writing something you don't enjoy? It's not like sitting at a chair for hundreds and hundreds of hours. It's like a riveting thing to do. You better be enjoying it.